And what is our topic here today? The Prop 19 and the demise of Prop 13 in California, understanding what these rules are, and most importantly, what you can do about it. I'm Mark Gilfix. I'm a partner at Gilfix and Paul Associates, and I'm here to take you through some crucial issues. And if you're here, or if you're watching this, I want you to ask some questions. Do you own your home in California? Do you own other property in California? Do you want to preserve it for your children? Do you want to preserve it for your grandchildren? Do you want these to be centers for your family for decades or generations to come? And understanding these new laws and the potential demise of Prop 13 is crucial, because if we don't understand it, we can't plan for it. And this is a high leverage moment. There are not many moments in life where one decision to plan or not plan can make a huge difference, but this is one of them. So taking action or not taking action can have a profound difference on your family's future. So what is this talk going to cover? Well, it's a decent amount, but I'm going to try to break it down into bite-sized pieces. So what do you need to know to protect California property in light of new laws? And that new law is Prop 19. So first, I'm going to go through what is Prop 19 and is Prop 13 done? What does it mean for Prop 13? What does it mean for holding on to properties, your kids and your grandkids? I'm going to talk specifically about how Prop 19 impacts your home. I'm going to then talk about how Prop 19 impacts other property, anything outside of your primary residence, and the rules around that and what it can mean. I'm going to talk about 3 big mistakes that California families are making. We're seeing them make these mistakes, what to avoid, what not to do. And then very importantly, I'm going to go through what you can do to protect properties and to minimize the impact of these changes in rules and some of the actions you can take. They are extraordinarily powerful. And I think you're going to get a lot out of it. And I have to always point out, this is not legal advice. This is just purely for educational purposes. We can't really provide you with legal advice unless you're working with us. So on that note, is this the end of Prop 13 now that Prop 19 is law? And what is Prop 19? What are we even talking about here? And as we get into this, I like to set the stage. The world is chaotic, right? Like we've just got through a pandemic. Hopefully it's over. There is war in Eastern Europe. We have insane inflation. The stock market is up and down, now seemingly down. Real estate is down recently, but it's been up massively the last few years. There's so much out of our control. And we have to, successful people and people who are in a great mental place. I see it from my clients all the time. You got to let go of what you can't control, but you have to understand what you can control. And property taxes are one of those issues. So what is Prop 13? You probably are familiar with it, but Prop 13 was passed many decades ago in California. Prop 13 means that property taxes for a California property cannot go up by more than 2% per year. Now, there's some exceptions. If it drops one year, it can go up more to make up for that. But largely speaking, it's been a huge boon to California property owners, because you buy a property a long time ago, even if the value of the property goes up 5, 10% a year, your property taxes only go up 2% a year. So if you've owned property for many years and certainly many decades, well, your property taxes are almost certainly way below what the fair market value would be. But if you buy a new property, it's reset. So Prop 13 lets you hold on to your existing properties without getting crushed by property tax increases. So that set the stage. And previously, you could largely pass along most, if not all, of your property in the next generation, and they could keep those low Prop 13 protected taxes, but no more. And that's where Prop 19 comes in. So Prop 19 doesn't affect you while you're alive. As long as you're alive, and for you and your spouse, property taxes should not change. But there is a profound change when properties go from you to your kids or to your grandkids or wherever you want to leave it. But it really affected parent-child transfers. So you need to understand that Prop 19 doesn't end Prop 13 per se. Prop 13 is still law, but it does end Prop 13 protections for parent-child transfers with some caveats. And so I'm going to go through some examples and we're going to talk about what this means. I'm going to give a couple illustrations. And so let's just do a quick rehash of the rules. So Prop 19 is now part of the California state constitution. It was passed by voters a couple of years ago. It became law February 16th, 2021, and it guts parent-child transfers of property. And contrary to popular belief, it can even gut protections for your primary residence. So a lot of people voted for Prop 19 thinking, okay, well, if I have a rental property or another property, that will get reassessed. but my primary residence is safe. As long as that goes to my kids and they live there, my property taxes are protected. And that's not really the case, at least if you live in coastal California, the Bay Area, or nice parts of LA, San Diego, Orange County, where houses are worth $2 million, $3 million or more. Now, there were upsides to Prop 19. I don't want to say it's all bad. It makes it easier to move within the state of California and keep low property taxes. But my big focus here is on the challenges it presents. So there's no protections for anything outside your primary residence, and there are only limited protections for the primary residence. So what are some specifics here? Well, again, it passed in February 16, 2021, it became law, passed in the election right before that. And really, it didn't actually undo Prop 13, it undid Prop 58. So Prop 58 was a law that let parents pass their primary residence to their kids, whether their kids live there or not, no matter how much the house was worth, kids got to keep mom and dad's low property taxes. No questions asked, as long as it was the primary residence. The house could be worth $10 million with an assessed value of $100,000, where they're paying hardly anything in property taxes. Went from parent to kid, kids kept that $100,000 assessed value. Now, that's an extreme example. Much more relevant for most families in California. You've owned a house for a while, maybe that saved the kids $10,000, $15,000 a year in property taxes. So a big deal. Now, under Prop 19, only the first $1 million in fair market value is protected from a reassessment, and that's only if kids live there. I'll go into that in a second. Now, Prop 58 also protected rental properties and other assets outside of the primary residence. Parents could pass up to $1 million in assessed value properties to their kids with no change in property taxes. That's assessed value. So let's say you had an apartment, a fourplex that was worth $2.5 million, but the assessed value was $1 million. Well, that entire fourplex could go to the kids without a change in property taxes. And that is no longer the case. So under Prop 19, which eliminated Prop 58, again, we have this limit for the property tax protection for the primary residence. You can protect, again, up to $1 million in fair market value, but that's only if a child is living in the house after mom and dad pass away or after they pass it to the kids. If you inherit a house from your parents, but you don't live there, there are zero protections. Property taxes will be fully reassessed at fair market value. Anything outside of the primary residence, unless you plan, is going to be fully reassessed. And I mentioned unless you plan because we do have options for keeping property taxes low. Stay tuned for that in other videos and later here today. So stay tuned. There are ways to protect it, but I just want to emphasize that Prop 13 is still law, but it's gutted. It's not really there anymore when assets go from parents to children. So we all have to be cognizant of that. And we all have to be aware of it. We all have to learn about it and think about our goals, because this is about what do you want for your kids? What do you want for the next generation? If you want to preserve your property or properties for the next generation, you need to plan ahead. You need to understand that. So stay tuned. Leave a comment or question if you want to learn, if you have anything specific. So I hope that is a useful overview of this new law. Now, what does it mean? Is this the end of Prop 13 for your primary residence? Does Prop 19 mean that your home is no longer protected? So to illustrate this, I want to tell a quick story. Now, this is based on a true story. Obviously, I have to change names because I'm a lawyer. We have strict confidentiality. But a couple months ago, I got a call from a woman named Kristen, and Kristen was almost in tears. She was calling because she knew that we do a lot of work in estate planning and the property tax planning field. And her father had passed away a few months before, and her mother had passed away years before. And Kristen had kids of her own, and her dream was to move back to the Bay Area and live there. She was living in the Central Valley. She had a normal job. She was an educator. She didn't make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, but she wanted to live where she grew up in Mountain View. She wanted her kids to get to grow up there. And her parents really lived the American dream. They came out from the Midwest, bought a house for practically nothing in Mountain View, and her dad literally built the house from there. He added on himself. He improved it. It was a labor of love, and it was that center for her family. And she was an only child. It was her dream to get that house and to raise her kids there too, but she didn't make much money. Her parents didn't leave her much else. It was just really the house. She inherited the house, thought everything was good until she got the property tax notice. She got a notice that property taxes were going to go up from $3,000 a year to over $24,000 a year. And for her, that was financially devastating. That pretty much meant she couldn't hold on to the house. And she was frantically calling us, say, hey, what happened here? What can we do about this? I thought I was safe. if I inherited a house from my parents and I lived there. And we had to sadly tell her that there wasn't really much we could do because she didn't plan ahead. The house was worth over $3 million, believe it or not, because it was a large lot and the house was decent. And that's the price of a decent house in some parts of California, as crazy as that may be. So even though she was living there, only part of the value of the house was protected from a reassessment. So she ended up, we couldn't really help her there. So I think she had to end up selling the house. And if she buys another place for cheaper, by the way, the property taxes for that replacement property are going to be higher as well because they're assessed at fair market value. So she lost the one chance she had to have a house in Mountain View with low property taxes. And it's because her family, like most, wasn't even aware of this issue. It wasn't on their radar. So I want to make sure that you're aware of it. And again, there are many tools we can use to reduce this if this is important to you and your family. So I want to give an example here of the impact that this can have, because the numbers can be staggering. The difference between planning and not planning. I don't want you to be stuck in Kristen's shoes. So let's talk about what the numbers are. So let's give an example. Let's say there's a home with a fair market value of $3.3 million and the assessed value is only $300,000. Mom and dad bought it for, $150,000 many years ago, and it's gone up 2% a year with Prop 13. So their assessed value, what they're paying taxes on, is only $300,000, but the fair market value of the home is $900,000. Now let's assume the child moves into the house after inheriting it. So I'm an Excel nerd. I used to be a management consultant. I create a very simple spreadsheet to look at what happens with taxes if they plan, and there are tools for planning. Stay tuned for that. There's other videos about that. And we're going to talk about that versus not planning. So let's say a child lives in the house, only $1 million in fair market value is protected, meaning the new assessed value, well, it's $300,000. $1 million is protected. The first 1.3 million is protected, but there's still $2 million in unprotected value of the house. Property taxes for $2 million go up. That's over $20,000 a year. So if you look at this over time, in 5 years, that's $114,000 in additional property taxes. In 10 years, it's $240,000. If a child holds on to a house over their lifetime, 30 years, it's almost $900,000 in additional property taxes if you don't plan, even if a child's living in the house after mom and dad are gone. And that number is even bigger if they don't live in the house. Let's say you want to leave a house to your kids, you want them to have the option of renting it out or keeping it as a residence. Let's say they decide to rent it out. If we don't plan ahead, Prop 19 means that property taxes would be fully reassessed at fair market value. No protections if a child's not living there. So property taxes go up from about $3,300 a year to over $36,000 per year. Over 5 years, that's $170,000 in extra taxes. Over 10 years, that's $360,000. Over 30 years, that's almost $1.4 million in extra property taxes. And keep in mind, when you pay property taxes, that's just the after-tax money. So to pay an extra $500,000 in property taxes, you have to earn $750,000 over your lifetime to pay that, because you get tax, you have income taxes, and you can only pay the taxes after. And we're limited in what we can deduct from our income. It's capped at $10,000 a year. So without worrying about the details there, the difference between planning and understanding what you can do to protect a property and not, just for one single family home in the Bay Area, in the nicer parts of LA or San Diego or Orange County, it can be a $1.3 million difference. So we need to understand Prop 19 and what you can do. And again, stay tuned for some solutions and see our other videos for solutions. But you need to understand this. So leave a comment or a question if you have questions about this. I'm going to get to those. We'll get back to those as soon as we can shortly. But I hope this helped to illustrate just the challenges that we're facing and just how big these numbers are. So let's now go to the next section. So is this the end of Prop 13 protections for a rental property? What does Prop 19 mean for a rental property or a vacation home, if you're lucky enough to have that, or if you own a commercial property and you want to leave it for the next generation? And just setting the scene, so many of our clients, they're not ultra high net worth. They scrapped and they saved, and you might relate to this. Did you just work your butt off? Save money here. You didn't go on the nicest trips. You didn't always get the nicest meals. You saved and you bought. You were lucky enough to get a rental property. And you're hoping that rental property will be there for your son or for your daughter. Or maybe you have a child with a disability or special needs, and you want that to be there just as that safety net. You just want it to be there to protect them. And I can tell you the new law, Prop 19, means that there are zero protections. And I mean zero protections unless you plan. And again, there are ways we can do this for protecting low property taxes for anything other than your primary residence. And as we've talked about, even the primary residence only has limited protections. So I just want to tell a story, and this is a more hopeful story, but we do a lot of work in the special needs planning space. And that's an area where holding on to property can be a world of difference, right? If you have a child who can't support themselves, who can't earn a lot of money because of a disability or some issue, it keeps parents up at night thinking about, where's my child going to live? No matter how much you want to make sure they have a roof over their head and some income to support them. Property can be an amazing way to do that, especially in the special needs planning side. So what if you want to make sure that you have a son with autism or a daughter with Down syndrome? You want to make sure there's that safety net. You need to have a special needs trust, but you need some money in it, or you need something that can generate income to pay living expenses. So I want to tell a story about a more hopeful story about a client. We'll call her Sarah. And Sarah's daughter has Down syndrome. And Sarah was setting up a special needs. She worked with us a few years ago to set up a special needs plan to make sure that her daughter is taken care of. But Sarah, the core of what she wants to leave for her daughter is a small fourplex that she has in San Jose. It's not worth that much, but in California terms, right? But she bought it a long time ago, and the property taxes are really low. I think they're only like $2,000 a year, but the property's worth over $1.7 million. And it kicks out some decent income. It's not great, but some solid income. And she luckily learned about Prop 19 through some of our talks and met with us. And we were able to develop a plan to keep the taxes low. But keep in mind, if she didn't do this, property tax would go up to about $20,000 a year. And I think after expenses, the fourplex was only earning $30,000 or $40,000 a year. And she wants it to be there to support her daughter with Down syndrome over the long term. So we were able to set up a plan to keep those taxes low, which means that it's profitable, that it will provide that safety net for her daughter. But without that, there would have been they would have probably had to sell it. It wouldn't have been economical to keep it. So I just want to emphasize again, the difference can be profound. And especially, and this might resonate with many of you, if you have a child with special needs or a child you're worried about, and you want that duplex or that fourplex or whatever it is to be there to support them with some income. Maybe it's for multiple kids. But when property taxes shoot up, maybe that property is no longer economical to keep. So let's just talk about even another example of what this can mean. So let me share slides again. For rental properties, again, if you don't plan, there's really nothing that can be done to protect a massive property tax reassessment. So I'll go back to that spreadsheet, my nerdy spreadsheet. So let's say it's a $2 million rental property, a fourplex, in the Bay Area or Los Angeles, Northern California, Southern California, or maybe it's more units, or maybe it's a cabin you have in Tahoe that you rent out when you're not using it. Here, get another example of a $2 million fair market value property. The assessed value is $200,000. And if the parents can step in and do planning for this and keep the taxes low versus not plan, the difference can be profound. Again, especially if you have a child who you think is really going to rely on this after you're gone. The difference over 10 years between planning and not planning can be over $200,000 in property taxes, over 20 years, almost $500,000, over 30 years, over $800,000 for one property alone. So, I just want to make the point here. We need to understand Prop 19 and understand there's steps we can take. And there's a lot that we can do, luckily, or, otherwise properties have to be sold. And sometimes that's the right thing. Sometimes it's not anybody's choice if property taxes spike up. So you need to understand this. And again, stay tuned for more information here. And if you have a comment or question, leave it here. I'm going to get to some comments and questions in just a moment, but I hope this was helpful for understanding what Prop 19 is for commercial properties. 3 property tax planning mistakes that we're seeing families make. So Prop 19 is this new law. We're seeing some people trying to sort of do it themselves to deal with it. We're seeing 3 big mistakes, and I don't want you to make these mistakes, or at least understand the implications if you take the wrong step and what it can mean. So what are these mistakes? Well, mistake number 1, some people think, well, if I add my child to the title of my home or my property now, maybe that will kind of avoid it. As long as I give them, a partial share, maybe that'll help. Or maybe I just give it to my child right now while I'm around. Just give it to them. Or Or I'm just getting, I have a trust, I have a living trust, I'm good. Nothing needs to be done. Or maybe I'll kind of figure out, I'll set up my own entity, a partnership or something like that, and I'll play games with that. Maybe I can prevent it. Don't do any of these things. And there might be other reasons you do it, but for Prop 19, do not do these. And we also have to be aware of capital gains and estate taxes. So there's multiple implications for all of these. So mistake number one, adding a child to the title now. Well, if you make them a partial owner now, one, that's a completed gift. So you have to report a gift to the IRS, whatever the value was given to your child. And you probably don't know any taxes on that. You can give up to $12.92 million during your life, but that's a completed gift. You no longer own that. If your child is sued, that's exposed. If your child goes bankrupt, that's exposed. And the worst thing, though, is that that portion would be reassessed right away. If you transfer it to your child, a partial share, if they're not living with you, that'd be reassessed from day one. You give a child a third of your house, add them to title, that's basically gifting them a share of your home. There'd be an immediate reassessment. And there's another issue that relates to mistake number two, gifting the house while you're still living. There are a lot of reasons we don't recommend doing this. Well, one, if you give it to them, same issues, lawsuits, bankruptcy, other problems. It's exposed. And two, there would be an immediate property tax reassessment. The whole house would be reassessed. Just because you're giving it to them while you're alive doesn't mean you've beaten Prop 19. Property taxes would go up instantly. And even if your child is living with you, you only have partial protections for your primary residence. If it's a commercial residence or a rental or something you don't live in, full reassessment at that time. So we don't recommend doing that. And if you give something to your kids while you're still living, they don't get the stepped up basis when you pass away. So we want to make sure that you're thoughtful about this, because if a house is in your estate or property is in your estate when you pass away, at least maybe property tax would go up. Even if you don't plan, property tax will go up, but at least your kids inherit it with the option of selling without capital gains tax exposure, because you get the benefit, or your family gets the benefit of a stepped up cost basis, meaning the IRS says, we don't care what mom and dad paid for it, just give us the value on the date of mom and dad's passing. That becomes a new cost basis. So at least your kids can sell the house. But if you sell the house for minimal capital gains taxes. But if you give it to them while you're living, not only would property taxes go up right away, they wouldn't get that stepped up basis. So if they ever sell the house or sell the commercial property, the rental, they'd face hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not more, in capital gains tax exposure. And there's some techniques we can use to mitigate that, but it's not a good move. I also talked about, well, some people mistakenly think, well, my house is in a living trust, I'm good. You need a living trust, but that alone doesn't do you any good when it comes to Prop 19 protecting low property taxes. And we've seen some people play around on their own saying, oh, I'll use an entity, I'll create my own partnership or my own LLC, and I'll play games there. Be very careful. You need to work with experts when it comes to using entities. And we do use entities for our clients, but we do this is our job. So don't try it at home. If you mess up just a little bit, property taxes can be fully reassessed and you might lose a stepped up basis. So don't try this at home. Don't make these mistakes. Don't think you can get around Prop 19 by taking shortcuts. There are ways to deal with it, but you need to work with an expert team. And we, of course, can be part of that team, but just don't try this at home. So I hope that was also helpful. Some of the three big mistakes people make when it comes to property planning, property tax planning in California. Let's go to the next subject. And I think this is maybe the most important part of this. And I'm going to share the slides again. And that is, what can we do to preserve low property taxes in light of this new law, Prop 19, and the end of Prop 13, at least as it goes to parent-child transfers? What can we do? What can we do? So again, I think I want to reframe this. We've been going through a lot, but I want you to take a moment just to think about what a property is, right? It's not just saving low property taxes, but a home is more than just a structure. It's more than just wood beams and drywall and hardwood floors. It's the emotional center of your family. And as I've talked about, Prop 13 was really gutted by Prop 19. And I want to make a point. I know some people have been hearing that maybe it's going to get overturned. Maybe Prop 19 will go away. And of course, that's possible. But keep in mind, in 2022, there was an attempt to get a repeal on the ballot. And it didn't even come close to getting enough signatures. And it's possible it could make the ballot in coming years to repeal Prop 19. But even if it makes the ballot, there are a lot of forces that would line up against it. The Realtors Association spent tens of millions to pass Prop 19. Firefighters unions, public employee unions would probably fight it. So I'm not a prognosticator for politics, But I think the key thing here is hope is not a strategy. Hope for change in laws or regulations is not a strategy. So we want to be aware of what we need to do, no matter what, to protect these assets that are so important to our families. Hope is not a strategy. And I know I've hammered this before, but I just want to reemphasize the impact of not planning for just one property. Let's assume that properties, again, worth $3.3 million, assessed value of $300,000. I circle this here, and I've made this point in multiple presentations. The difference for one property can be $300,000, $350,000 plus over 10 years, over $1.3 million through your child's life if they inherit a house and hold on to it and have to pay these higher taxes. So I want to give you some tips that where you don't need a lawyer necessarily to preserve low property taxes. And I'm going to talk about where you do need a lawyer and where we can do some extraordinarily powerful things. So one area, one really crucial tip to at least get the $1 million, and you don't need a lawyer for this part, to at least capture the $1 million in fair market value protection. So Prop 19, again, just as a rehash, when you pass your child, if a primary residence goes from parent to child, only for the primary residence, there is a $1 million in fair market value protection from property tax reassessment. Prop 19 will protect the first $1 million of fair market value beyond the assessed value from a reassessment, but only if the child lives in the house, claims it as his or her residence, and moves in within 1 year of mom and dad passing away. So one thing is, if you are going to inherit a property from your parents, move in within 1 year. Let your kids know you better move in within 1 year, and at least you can get that $1 million in protection. And in many cases, that might be enough. If your house is worth under 1.3, 1.4 million, probably is enough to keep property taxes from going up. Now, without other planning, if the child ever moves out, it's possible taxes could then at that point be reassessed. But that is one way. If the fair market value is less than $1 million above your assessed value, just make sure your child moves in. That might be enough. Now, out of the box thing is, let's say you want to leave it to a loved one or someone you care about, and they're not your child. Well, adopt them. Now, that probably requires a lawyer. But if you adopt somebody, hey, it's parent-child, and you might be able to get at least that $1 million in protection. Now, adopting is a pretty big deal. So that's a big thing, but we have recommended that to clients in the past. That's something you can do. Now, it's fraught with other issues. Now, two, of course, another way to deal with Prop 19, this isn't really dealing with it, but after you pass away, as long as you don't screw up ahead of time, property does get at least a stepped up basis. So if you inherit a property, tax it, and your parents didn't plan or you didn't plan for your kids, property taxes are going to spike up, but hey, they can always sell it. They'll get that stepped up basis as long as you didn't screw up before then. And they can sell for minimal or no capital gains taxes. So that's one thing. So again, make sure, two tips where you don't really need a lawyer per se. One, make sure that your kids move into the house within 1 year. Two, you can always just sell the property with a stepped up basis as long as it wasn't transferred during life. And you got to make sure you have a core estate plan for that, a revocable living trust. Another outside of the box thing, let's say that you want to leave it, you have a long time romantic partner, and you want to leave it for them. And we have a lot of clients who are unmarried. They've been together for many, many years, and they want to leave their properties to each other or make sure that their spouse, well, non-spouse, but their romantic partner can live in the house after they're gone. Well, get married. Because if you get married, when you pass away, at least when it goes to your spouse, there's no reassessment of property taxes. But if you just have a long-time romantic partner and you're not married and you want them to be able to live in your house after you're gone, property taxes would go way up. So solution number 3, again, for a long time connected couples who aren't married, or if you're thinking about it, if you do get married, that's a way to prevent a property tax reassessment, at least for that partner. But number 4, take action with experts, and we can be those experts and plan, because we can basically protect everything. And you have to be cognizant of not only property taxes, but capital gains tax planning and estate tax issues. Depending on the size of your estate, estate tax laws are in flux. So you need to work with experts on this. We've helped a lot of families with this. And we also have to be aware of estate tax issues. Right now, you can pass up to $12.92 million per person. But on January 1st, 2026, the exemption is going to drop by 50%. And depending on where you're at, you might have estate tax exposure. And that could be hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. So we have to balance all of these issues when we're thinking about Prop 19 planning, if you really want to do it on a sophisticated level, to really make sure everything is preserved for future generations. So just kind of sharing some high level summaries of this. We have developed uniquely crafted solutions, but there's no one size fits all. Because again, depending on the size of your estate, depending on capital gains issues, there's a lot of different tools we might deploy here. So I want to take a moment to say, like, should you meet with us? Is it worth meeting with us about this? I mean, you don't have to meet with us. I want to empower you with understanding of what this law is and what the implications are. You might say, hey, I don't care if my property is there for future generations. My kids can sell it if they want. It's not really a big deal to me. But hey, big deal, right? And if you own property outside of California, not an issue. But if you own a home or rental property in California and you do want to at least give your kids the option of holding on to it, you should talk to us. If you're concerned about property or estate taxes, you should talk to us or give us a chance to go through it with you. And if you want to protect assets for future generations, and we don't want you to wait, because if something happens and you haven't planned ahead, remember I've told other stories, the Kristen story, once you lose the opportunity to lock in low property taxes, you lose it forever. Now, there are ways you can at least protect some of your properties from increases. Again, if your kid moves into the house within a year of mom and dad passing away, hey, that's great. You've prevented at least a partial reassessment. So make sure that your kid moves in within a year. If you're not married and you want to leave a house to somebody you love and they're a romantic partner, hey, you can get married. That can prevent it. If you want to leave it to someone who's not a kid, maybe you adopt them. And that would at least give you the $1 million in protection, at least for the primary residence. But keep in mind, for commercial residences, moving in is irrelevant, or a rental property moving in is irrelevant. It has to be mom and dad's primary residence, and it has to be the kids' primary residence after they pass away. And we've helped hundreds of families with this already. Again, don't wait. And I want you to take just a moment to think about the future. What is your vision for the future? What do you want for your kids and your grandkids? Is it important to you to hold on to the home and the rental property? And at least I want you to be empowered with knowledge so you can make an educated decision. An educated decision is a good one, and this is a high leverage moment. This is one of those moments where making a certain call, taking steps to plan, can mean the difference of holding on to properties for multiple generations or losing them. And real estate is the best type of asset to own for tax reasons, and it just kind of locks up a lot of value. It's a lot easier to burn through, $500,000 in the bank than it is to burn through $500,000 in equity in a property. So families, and we work with so many families who have achieved high net worth status, and so much of the time they just bought and held real estate. So if you can hold that in your family for a long time, it's just such an extraordinary way to build wealth across multiple generations. So if you'd like to talk to us, very easy to find us. You can find us 650-493-8007 or gilfix.com. You can leave your contact information, the chat function if you'd like. I will get to some questions now, but I just hope this empowered you. I hope you got a lot out of it. It's easy to find us, gilfix.com. Follow our Gilfix Law YouTube channel, subscribe, share this video if you think anybody in your family needs to understand this. There's a lot of misconceptions out there about Prop 19. But again, I want you to take just a moment before I go to Q&A. Let's just take one moment. So first, let's take a breath. I know I've gone through a lot, so I hope I didn't go too fast. I tried to break it down. And I hope this helped you just understand some of the misconceptions around these new laws, the end of Prop 13 and what it means for future generations. I hope you got some action items out of this. Again, share this. Easy to contact us, gilfix.com, gilfix.com. If you'd like to chat with us, happy to chat with you for a couple minutes to see if we're a fit, if we can help. We're helping a lot of families with this type of planning. But most importantly, I hope you spread the word. Let people in your life know about this. We've had so many clients, we do the planning for them, and they talk to their friends about it. They have no idea. You guys, you watching this, you are part of that select group that understands it now. So spread the word. Let's all understand that we can take steps to plan for this. And at least let's not screw up the basics. Don't give up property away while you're alive without talking to experts. Don't leave a property to your kids and have your kids just rent it out, not knowing they could have protected part of it. But most importantly, there are steps we can take to protect everything from property tax reassessments in an optimized way for your family and protect them for multiple generations. So I got a lot of questions, but again, if you want to stick around for these, that's great. But thank you so much for joining me here today. We have weekly webinars usually, so check out gilfix.com for that. Check out our Gilfix Law YouTube channel, subscribe. It's growing. We're getting more and more views there, but we want to spread the word and we want to be a source of information for you. So lots of questions. So let me see what we got. I saw Oh, I'm sorry, Lisa, you had an echo with your audio. I hope nobody else had an echo. Um, so I have a question from Andy. So what if there are two children, only one resides in the inherited house? We believe they would get that protection, that as long as one child lives in the house, they should get that $1 million in protection. Keep in mind, this is a new law. It was not very well written. There's a lot of interpretation that assessors' offices need to do because it didn't really clarify what happens if just one kid lives there, but another kid doesn't. But we believe they would get the $1 million in protection. I have a question about a new provision in the California state legislature. So I'm familiar with some efforts from some legislators to try to get something to voters to change this law. I haven't studied them that closely yet. We're certainly going to take a closer look as we get close to the elections. But right now, it's all kind of speculation. So could something change? Yeah, something could change with the law. But as I said, hope is not a strategy. But you could, if you don't want to take any action out, there's a lot of uncertainty around your property. If you're thinking about selling it in the next few years, yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about this. The Prop 19 planning that we recommend is really if you know you want to hold on to a property and you know you want at least the option for your kids to hold on to it long term. Because again, let's say your kids get the property, gets the stepped up basis. Okay, they can sell it, no capital gains taxes. But if they buy a new property, it's going to have high property taxes too. So it can still be a difference of hundreds of thousands of dollars over your children's lives versus just holding on to the property you left them. And if it's a rental, it could be uneconomical to hold on to it. So again, that's why don't just count on future change. It could change. Obviously, anything can change. The law is often in flux, but we got to be very clear about what we can do and what we can't do. We have a question from, are you protected as a child living in a primary residence if your parents put their house in an irrevocable trust? So that an irrevocable trust is kind of like saying, it's a type of tree. There are hundreds of species of trees. There are a bunch of different types of irrevocable trusts. So it depends. We'd have to see the trust itself. But irrevocable trust can sometimes be a wonderful part of the planning process, but the wrong type of irrevocable trust might screw it up. So we really have to see what type of trust that is. And again, that's why we don't want anybody trying this at home or working with somebody who doesn't understand this issue inside and out, who doesn't have a ton of experience with this. So we've seen some people who came to us, they worked with other advisors and they got really bad advice, not to call anybody out, but they did things that we can't undo now. And as a result, their family is going to be exposed to hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes. We have a clarification question. So the protection is $1 million plus the current assessed value, correct? So whatever your current assessed value, you can see that in your property tax statement. It'll show the land and the structure value, add those up. That's the assessed value. 1% of that, 1.1, 1.2% is what you pay in property taxes each year. So you can kind of generally just multiply your property tax payment by 100, more or less, and that is your assessed value. And so yeah, take your current assessed value, add $1 million to it. If it's your primary residence and if your kids live in it within a year of you passing away, that portion of the value will not be reassessed. But if your house is worth more than that, any part of the value above that will be reassessed about 1% per year. So again, imagine you have a $300,000 assessed value home and it's worth $2.3 million. Well, you pass away, leave it to your kids, add $1 million to 300,000, 1.3 million. That's not touched. Property taxes stay the same for that. But hey, the house is worth 2.3 million. That leaves $1 million exposed to a reassessment. Property taxes go up by about $12,000 a year for that. Now, if the house is only worth 1.2 million and the assessed, 1.3 million and the assessed value is 300,000, if your kids live there, there would be no change in property taxes because it's all protected. It's within that $1 million limit. So I try to give some examples of that. And let's see here. So from Andy, a question, what if there are two owners of a rental property and only one takes steps that we recommend? We'd have to kind of look at it. So usually you can only really plan for what you own. So whatever, you can protect what you're leaving to the next generation from a property tax reassessment, but the other party would have to do something, or that portion of the property might be reassessed. So we'd have to kind of see that situation. Often having multiple owners can actually give us some other options to keep property taxes low. We'd have to really see it. So usually you can only plan with what you own. So if someone else owns a property with you, we'd have to talk that through and look at it. Here's a question from Maria. So if you want to leave your primary residence to your children upon your death, do they all have to move in? What if they have families of their own? So good question, Maria. So we believe that if one child moves in, the property, they should get the $1 million in protection. But again, this is a new law and we're seeing how the assessor offices are dealing with it. But I think largely speaking, I think, and I'm going to probably follow up on this because I don't quote me on this because there could be some weird changes in law, but I believe they would get the full $1 million in protection as long as one child lives there. That's still being hashed out. I'm gonna have to look into that, but that's a very good question. Let's see, a lot of good questions. So good question from Dick. I'm only gonna take a couple more questions before we wrap this up. So Dick had a good question. Upon selling the family home, can you do a 1031 exchange? So a 1031 exchange is where you take an appreciated piece of real estate and you sell it, and as long as you buy another piece of real estate, you don't have to pay capital gains taxes. Your cost basis carries over. So it's a way where you can avoid paying capital gains taxes. Now, it has to be a rental property for that. So if it's just a single family home and you live in it and your kids get it and they immediately want to sell it, well, they can't do a 1031 exchange at that point. They'd have to rent it out for ideally 2 years. And there's different ways we can do this. And then they could do a 1031 exchange, but it has to be converted to a rental property first. So 1031 exchange is a very powerful tool. Many of our clients, we've helped them to avoid massive capital gains taxes because they talked to us before they sold the house, and we were able to come up with strategies to avoid capital gains tax. You can roll your cost basis into a new property, like a rental property that generates much more income without taking that big capital gains tax hit. So if you're going to do that, then you wouldn't worry as much about Prop 19. But then keep in mind, if you do the 1031 exchange, you're going to have high property taxes for that replacement rental property. Whereas if you preserve the low property taxes and you just rent it out, then you've saved 20, depending on the value of the house, you might be saving $10, $15, $20,000 a year in taxes. You have to make way more rental income in the replacement property to make up for the higher property taxes. So again, that's why it's just so powerful. Wow, what great questions. Dick, thank you so much for the compliment. These are complicated ideas, but thank you so much. And time is valuable. And so I hope you got a lot out of this. And I just want to, before we close, again, there are a few moments in life where a decision to buy that house, to marry the right person, to start the business, little moments where decisions can have implications for decades. And this is one of those moments. So just visualize that future that you want. And if this is part of what your future is, what you envision as that goal for your family, just close your eyes for a second and envision what you hope for your kids and your grandkids. And if holding on to your home and that rental for them, to give them that safety net, to give them that emotional center is part of that, we should talk. Let's at least explore the ideas. If you're not so concerned about it, then, it is what it is, that's okay. But spread the word, let other people know about this information, share this talk. We have a lot of videos on the Gilfix Law YouTube channel. Comment, like. I hope you got a lot out of this. We're gonna give more webinars next week. We try to give weekly webinars. So stay tuned. We welcome you as part of our client community, gilfix.com. Very easy to find us. But thank you so much. We had such a huge response to this. So thank you for being a part of our community. And I hope you got a lot out of this. So as my mom likes to say, I hope everybody stays safe, sane, and healthy. I'm Mark Gilfix. Take care.